Yeah.
Okay.
That's on now.
All right, thank you.
You might just need to.
Test.
But you're gonna have to kill your volume on this or mute yourself.
Um,
We have the same problem with Jason.
how about now? Yeah. Yeah, it's working. I just don't want to have the reverb.
Right. Anyway.
Exactly.
It's distracting if you're trying to talk, and you're listening to yourself.
And it's the worst when you also see yourself projected. Yeah.
Okay, it's 4:30 and time to start the work session on the Riverfront project. And at this point, I'll turn it over to John Zarneski, and he can introduce everyone that's here for this work session, and we can get started.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is, what are we now? A couple of months away from concluding the Riverfront redevelopment project. We're getting near the end. One of the things we recently did was a market analysis, and today we're going to present to you a feasibility analysis, which used some of the findings from that market analysis and will guide us in the future concept development. So this will again further guide what we see in our final plan. We have invited here tonight with you a number of folks. We invited our advisory committee. We invited different members from the community that actually participated in the feasibility analysis. We invited some of our planning commissioners. So folks may be streaming in, coming in here as we go along. But Cadence Petros is with Echo Northwest. It's a economic, what would you call it? What kind of?
Economics planning and policy firm.
Okay, thank you. Economics policy and planning firm. And they are a sub-consultant to First 40 Feet. And Cadence will be presenting to you the findings from that feasibility study and the latest and greatest on the public concept for a public market. So we've got, those are the two big things that we want to share with you. And I think at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Cadence.
All right. Thanks, John. Mayor Whitney, councilors. Oh, yep. Oh, sure. That's a great idea. Hello, everybody. My name is Cadence Petros. I am not an economist or a planner. I have a background in law and local government. And so for about 20 years, I worked for local jurisdictions, helping them do affordable housing, downtown revitalization, and projects like these. So I'm really excited to talk to you about some of this nerdy stuff that I hope you all enjoy as much as I do.
Tim Dillon, Executive Director, United Economic Development District, also on the advisory committee. I'm Bill DeLuca, I'm from Soldotna, and very invested in this project. I love it.
Steve Maley, Commercial Loan Officer, Northern Bank, and also on the advisory committee.
Right. I'm Annette Villa and I run the Soldotna Wednesday Market, and I am also very excited and invested in this project. I think it'll be a great thing for our community.
CO Rydstrom, I'm here representing the Public Works Department.
My name is Maddie McElroy. I'm Executive Director of the Soldotna Chamber of Commerce. I'm Michaela Randall. I'm the Assistant Director of the city's market.
Parts.
Jennifer Hester, Treasurer. Or Rainer.
Thanks. Appreciate it. That, and I think, yeah, most of us know. Most of us here. So it's great though to get the introductions and turn it over to you.
All right. So this afternoon, we're going to mostly talk about the development feasibility for a few different uses, as well as the market hall concept. But first, before we get into the meat of the presentation, I want to make sure we spend at least a few minutes setting the stage so that we'll all have the right context for what's happening. And at the end, we'll talk about some possible next steps. So I think you all have seen this slide before. It's just to let you know and ground you in where we are in the project. We've been talking to a bunch of folks, and First 40 Feet has been doing some interesting engagement and drawing and really thinking about what the future of this area might look like. And right now we're here to talk to you about some of this technical analysis, specifically sort of the development feasibility of different ideas in the present moment. And so when you think about the concept plan overall, we're talking about a 20 to 30-year plan for full build out. But what we wanted to understand today is what can we do now to jumpstart it? And so some of the news that you might be hearing is a little bit of a spoiler alert. There's not everything is feasible in today's market, given today's conditions, and that's okay. That doesn't mean it won't ever happen. It's trying to figure out what can we do now to make sure that in that lifespan of the concept plan, you can get all of the things that you're looking for in that concept plan. So as John alluded, part one of our work for Echo Northwest was to do a market analysis. And that's really understanding what does your community need? Where are you spending money elsewhere that you could be spending in Soldotna? And what we learned from that is you have capacity for additional retail and restaurant uses, as well as multiple kinds of housing. What we did now is really understanding what is possible to develop in this moment, given the market, how much it costs to build the thing, and what rents and proceeds you can get from operating it. And those are not necessarily aligned. Just because you need it doesn't mean people can pay for new construction to make it happen. So the scope of our work right now is really understanding what is that phase one catalytic set of projects or opportunities that we can do in the near term. And how does the private marketplace or public-private partnerships come into play? And so what we did is we used a pro forma analysis to understand the residential and mixed use possibilities and hotel uses, and then also did a much more high level concept exploration of the market hall. And we'll go through the details of that coming up here. So some of the key findings that we found were you have an amazing community with a lot of talent. And there's a lot of interest in a market hall concept. There's not only interest, there's also capacity to operate and tenant those spaces. And that is unique, and not every community has that. So I would say that is one of the top line findings. We also, in our analysis, found that 3-story mixed use, as well as just straight residential of 3 stories, is not feasible at this time, given current market conditions. And I'll have a bunch of caveats to that as we discuss what a prototypical analysis looks at. Because one of the things I have on my whiteboard is all models are wrong, but some are useful, right? Because we're depicting a hypothetical about what reality might be, but in each context, on each real piece of property, the conditions are different. And there might be something that can work on a specific piece of property that when you're looking at a hypothetical is not possible. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. Townhomes, however, are possible, especially if the land is vacant and not in current use. And a hotel might be feasible, but needs some help. And so one of the key findings here is there is demand for a new hotel, and that might be something that happens, but it might be something that you want to do after you have some amenities in place. And so the bottom line is this will definitely be a phased approach. And one of the key kind of values that we've been talking about a lot is how do you work to get the desired development that you want out of this concept plan, and also ensure that Soldotna remains affordable and accessible both to residents and businesses. And there is some tension there, and also some complementary things that we will talk about as we go forward. So as we talk through some of these details, there's a couple top line questions to keep in mind. One is how can the city work to balance this new development? And the way you get new development is by being able to charge higher rents, either to businesses who lease the property or residents who live there, right? So how do you do that and also maintain affordability for the community? And then what is the city's appetite for different development options and your level of participation in helping them come to fruition? And how you answer those questions is really going to feed into your phasing and what it is that you do, and ultimately what gets developed when. What this means is you've embarked on a year-long plus project, right? To really think about this once in a lifetime property. It's amazing what you have, this 85 acres. And the question is going to be, how much do you want to define the future of this parcel or this set of parcels? And how much investment, both in time and money and other sort of city energy, are you going to want to bring to bear to be the directors of that? And you have optionality in that. And that's really the key thing that you all need to be thinking about, both now and as you move forward, when you adopt the plan, which we hope that you will, and then as you think and work to how you're going to adopt it or let it unfold. And there are lots of intermediate choices. It's not an all or nothing kind of thing. You have lots of different choices that you can make over time. I should have mentioned at the top of this will be a lot more fun for all of us. If you have questions, to please, and Mayor, I'm sure you can direct counsel on how you want that to work, but to ask questions as I go, or if you prefer, I can answer questions at the end. Excellent, great, thank you so much. And I will try to pause and breathe to at least make the room for you to do that. Okay. So the first thing we're going to talk about is our pro forma analysis for residential mixed use and hotel feasibility. And so our questions were, what can the market bring, right? And if the market can't bring it all the way, what can the city do to help? And how much will it need to help in order to make those things happen? Oops. Okay. So this is just a little bit on methodology. When there's a lot of different ways that you can evaluate whether something can be done from a real estate perspective. Because we're talking about 85 acres and we're talking about a future over possible many different parcels, we didn't go into a deep dive into each potential parcel. What we did is what we call a residual land value estimate. And so we look at different prototypes: 2-story townhome, 3-story apartment building, 3-story mixed use with ground floor commercial. And we have a pro forma, essentially a spreadsheet that talks about all of the costs that feed into building something like that. And we have lots of different inputs. And then we look at and what rents or sales price can one get from that based on what happens in Soldotna currently. And then we look at, if you add up all the development costs and all the value that proceeds from that, how much can then the developer pay for the land? We're basically solving for land price. If the land price, if essentially that orange box is taller than the average price of land in Soldotna, that's great. You can buy it, you might have money left over, the profitability is high, right? If it's not, you can't, right? Or in this prototype, you cannot. If you already own the property and you don't need to buy it, maybe then you can do it. And that's where the specifics of each real estate transaction really come to bear. So what we did is we looked at 3 types, and these are just exemplars. We didn't go look into the financials of an Anchorage townhome project, but we found things that exist in the region, and many of them don't exist exactly in Soldotna yet. We're trying to attract them, although there may be some examples. And so our findings were that mixed use and multifamily is not feasible right now. What you want to see is the blue bar going up into the gray areas. And we have an average land value that's a kind of a big bar. But what it means is if there's vacant land, it's about $3 a square foot. But if it's got something on it and it's operating, it's about $17 a square foot. So you want it in that band. But what we see for 3-story mixed use and multifamily is that it's actually at a negative land value. And what that means is not only would a developer need to receive the land for free, but they would need some additional subsidy in order to make a development feasible, given today's observed rents. And so what you see here is, while we're seeing rents at about $1.50 per square foot for rent, they would need to be at like $2.30 in order to make a development feasible if they had to purchase the land at today's assessed value. So that's not great for mixed use and multifamily development. And there you can see, right? It's at the -33 and -41. Townhomes, on the other hand, are more feasible, especially if the land is vacant or underutilized. And so we've seen observed sales price in Soldotna and Kenai and up to Anchorage that were in that $250 to $325 per square foot, and Homer even higher, right? And so what you're seeing is, without city support, a developer could come in and do a couple stories of townhomes and make that work. And I'll pause here and I'll say, and if that's all you got, it might not be great for Soldotna for a couple reasons. One, it's 2-story townhome construction. It's not necessarily the full build out of the concept plan. And that's spendy. And not all your residents could actually afford that. And so again, this is where the balancing comes in. Yes, it might be great to have some new townhomes that are top of the market and start to spur this development potential for the new district. And what are you going to do to balance it so that it actually meets the needs of more of your residents than just those who can pay top dollar? So then the hotel analysis. Here we used an internal rate of return way of looking at whether a hotel is called for and can be developed. And part of the reason we switched gears in this is because there's a lot of permutations of how hotels operate, and they also take time to stabilize. And so this makes more assumptions about the hotel that we don't really want to do when we have not very many facts, but you kind of need to do it in order to do a viable hotel analysis. And so the kind of hotel we were looking at here is kind of a mid-upscale branded hotel. So it's a little bit different from what we're currently seeing in the area. And here are some of the assumptions that we used. What we know is where people place their money, right, really depends on the risk profile that they want for that cash. And so there's safe investments, and then there's riskier investments. Bonds, safe; hotels, pretty risky, right? And so the higher the risk, the more return they want to be able to expect. And so for a hotel, an internal rate of return is about 14%. Now, somebody may feel like I can do 12 because I understand this area, I'm more certain or have more money to place. But again, this is sort of an arm's length transaction for somebody coming in. Here are some more assumptions. I won't go into all of the details, but there's sort of this concept that there's sort of a natural state of where the number of hotel rooms are, that the ecosystem can absorb them. And essentially what we did is an analysis of where that average daily room rate is and where that natural occupancy rate is, and the actuals are higher. And so it shows a demand, they think, for about 62 additional rooms. So there is a need for more hotel rooms. And so that's how we landed on that. And so when they crunched the numbers, essentially the return did not get up to 14%. But there are a lot of ways that an actual hotel development could boost that IRR. And here are some of them. Hotels have a unique place in the sort of liquor law paradigm in Alaska. You have a very interesting and confusing set of alcohol laws, but in a hotel's benefit, being able to get a liquor license is one of them. And so that can boost IRR quite a lot. And then another thing that was within city control is what are the amenities available in the area? And that's one of the reasons when we talk about phased development, that this might not be the first thing that you do, but maybe it's something that you pursue as phase 2 or later in phase 1, because as you do park and trail investment, as you see maybe a market hall or some of the other pieces that we'll talk about, there's a more there. And so when there's an amenities, including Soldotna Creek Park, which is such a fantastic amenity, that helps raise room rates. People will want to be there. They'll want to stay there. And then there are some other pieces. Obviously, the riverfront view is a thing. And then there are also ways that if the city was interested in really stimulating hotel development, that you could defray some of the costs of development.
On your room rate figure, you had $169 or something. I'm assuming as a year-round rate.
That's right. Yeah.
Things around here are usually May 1st to about the middle of September, usually double or triple that rate.
Yep. So it's just averaged. It's average across the 365. Yeah. So I'm going to pause there, take a drink. Do you have any questions before I move on to the market hall? Okay. Oh yeah, please.
Go ahead.
And I'm going to say this poorly, but I'm trying to at least start the discussion. In listening, it sounds like money is kind of a very, very important, maybe primary function. I'm wondering where aesthetics come in. And so I haven't heard that yet. It may be coming, or maybe this isn't the correct presentation on that, but it sounds like a significant driving factor is making money.
Yes,
Is there a place for aesthetics?
absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes, of course. And I'll speak to that. And it really does. I'm offering you an insight into what an arm's length developer would be interested in providing and why they'd be interested in providing it. What your job is, right, is to make sure that the city is what you want it to be, you and your community members, right? And so there are pieces of this presentation where aesthetics matter, for sure. And we can talk more about that. And that's part of sort of the enhance the attractiveness of the area piece, and creating a there will also boost rents. But from a more global, what is the city doing? It's absolutely imperative, because you want to have a beautiful, livable place for your residents and visitors. Yeah. Market hall options and considerations. Okay, so the first part that we were just talking about was really just it was Excel spreadsheet. What are the inputs and outputs kind of questions for a developer to build the things that we're interested in the concept plan. This market hall analysis is much more high level, very qualitative, and is based on case studies and engagement. Before you went out and said, yes, we're going to go do a market hall, there are many, many more steps, some of which would be doing a more detailed financial analysis of what it would take to get there and what the kind of operating expectations would be. This is not that. What we did is take a look at some exemplar case studies and see how they could be applied to this place, and talk to some key stakeholders to gauge interest and also capacity. Again, just because you want a thing doesn't necessarily mean you can have a thing or do the thing. And so that this high level analysis of what are the assets in your community that make it more likely or less likely that you can make this come to pass. So we took a look at 3 case studies that were kind of along a spectrum, because we wanted to highlight for you all kind of the optionality in what is possible and what is done in other places. So we'll start with the Grove Market Hall in Bend, which is a completely privately developed, owned and operated facility. And then we'll move on to Pybus in Wenatchee, which is a public-private partnership. And then Kodiak Marketplace, which is native owned and operated here in Kodiak. Well, it's not quite open. It was going to be open before this presentation, but I think it hasn't actually quite opened yet. So the Grove is located in Bend, Oregon. It is in a newer area of the city, high end, lots of residential, dense development. It is about 14,000 square feet, and it's beautiful. It is full of local retailers. It has 2 anchor tenants. There's indoor, outdoor seating. They do programming. And I say here, design matters. And what that means is you need to be very thoughtful, regardless of whether it's privately owned or publicly owned, that you think about how the space is going to be used. You probably hear me say multiple times, multi-use space. And that's a good thing and it's a bad thing, because you want to make sure that you have some flexibility in your spaces, but you also want to have purposeful design that is functional for specific uses. So front of house, back of house, ventilation, usability and functionality are key. And so we'll be talking about this, but the folks at the Grove learned that the hard way. Where you put trash matters. Having a place to put trash matters. Things like that. The second case study is Pybus Public Market. Of course. Yeah.
Sorry, when you're talking about strong anchors, do you have recommendations in this case?
Yeah, we do. Not specific vendors at this time, but there are some characteristics, right? And we'll just go there right now. So there are a lot of values you can lean into in a public market. What we've heard loud and clear from the beginning of engagement is supporting local small business is paramount. And also that you have a lot of pent up demand of entrepreneurs who, if I had space, I would. If I could afford to move in, I would do this. And it's not just talk, because you've got this Wednesday market that I don't know if you know how fantastic and huge that is, right? So you've got this, and it's one of those assets that it makes sense to rely on and lean into, right? So the reason I say that is because for an anchor tenant, you want an experienced operator that's open a lot, right? So part of the reason you want that is I'm a visitor. I know that this restaurant is going to be open for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, or this market is going to be open 7 days a week. And I go there and they're not going to go out of business in 6 months, right? The added benefit of that is when you fill in with micro businesses or other small business or niche business, these anchors not only attract visitors, but they serve as a sort of a mentor and regulating impact for those other vendors. That mix of experience is pretty key.
So a follow-up to that, at the Wednesday markets, have there been discussions amongst the vendors about potentially a public market like this? Since we've been talking about it throughout the summer?
I have not heard discussion about it, but I know that there would definitely be interest in it, especially like the anchor vendors. I mean, there's a lot of anchor vendors that would really be able to utilize something that would be all year round. It would be amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, we have some really diehard, I call them diehards. And they are the anchor vendors, but they're the diehards, are the ones that are there during the wind and the rain. I can always count on them being there. I don't ever have to worry. And that's the kind of vendor that she's talking about for being an anchor. Ones that will never disappoint. They'll always be open and nobody has to call. They can always count on them being there. Nobody has to worry. Yep, they're going to be there. They're the diehards. They're the anchors.
Yeah. And really this concept that first arose when we were working on this, kind of the beginnings of this project, particularly because of the Wednesday market and this idea of extending the season. There are folks who would want to be year round if they could. There are others who want to be pop-up. And so that's part of where that multi-use space comes in, where you can have folks who are there 365, and then some who are seasonal, some who are still only outside for the Wednesday market itself. But the idea of indoor, outdoor is we think really compelling.
Based on some of those comments from the locals, what size of a facility would they be looking at inside of that marketplace?
That is a really good question. And I have a high level answer for you, and we'll have some slides on that. But the main answer is TBD, right? There's so much more work. If you all are interested in exploring this further, that you're going to need to do more engagement, but also do more analysis about what actual uses you want to have in there, how much it will cost, how it will be operated. There are a lot more steps in that. Yeah.
Question.
Yeah, Jordan.
Kind of expanding on this discussion about anchor tenants. One of the needs I've heard from our small business community is the need for commercial kitchen space. We don't have a lot of facilities that offer that. And I believe earlier in the discussion, when I think the idea of a market building or some equivalent to that first came out, one of the ideas I heard in that discussion was the idea of riverside dining and having some kind of commercial kitchen space in this. And I don't know if as part of the marketplace discussion, as that's progressed, has there been any decision on whether or not the recommendation would be to include commercial kitchen space for one of the vendors, where we could give young growing businesses that are maybe stuck in a food truck or want to grow to an established footprint have that option? Or is the business space that we're looking at in the preliminary designs for this just traditional office commercial space only?
That's a lot to unpack. We talked, yes, we talked a lot about commissary kitchen and shared kitchen space. Nothing has been decided or landed on yet. You'll see it definitely shows up as a thing. And I guess the one thing I would say is one of the key elements is restaurant. So somebody would have a kitchen, food would be had, but whether that's a shared commissary kitchen or not is to be determined.
Some option to have food by the river and on this building would be,
Yeah.
I think, critical.
Yeah, for sure. Yes, that's one of the critical elements for sure. Okay. So we'll just speed through these next couple case studies, because I think the more interesting information is what we learned from stakeholders and some thoughts that we have on next steps. So the Pybus Public Market is a true public-private partnership. It's on property that was owned by the port and then conveyed to the city. The city gave a land lease to a nonprofit that was created for this purpose. There was also private investment philanthropy, and it's operated now by the nonprofit. Whereas the Grove is charging high-end market rate rents that actually pay debt service and allow a profit to be made. Pybus Public Market received public investment. They have interesting public financing mechanism where they get a portion of an additional sales tax for certain uses, private investment. And now they continue to do philanthropic or other subsidy for operations, but they're, like it says here, many years in on the verge of breaking even with their lease rates. So they've had a very long ramp up because they want the support and the small businesses they wanted in the space was more important than achieving market rents. And so that again is one of those questions of how would Soldotna want to do this if you had a public market? Would you want to make it as sort of market feasible as possible, or would you want to lean into affordable rents for micro and small businesses? Again, it's the back and forth that you need to weigh. Oh, the interesting thing about this one is there was it's along the Columbia River, and there was trail development around the same time that they were developing, or this is essentially a very significant rehab of an existing building, but they were happening contemporaneously, right? And so that's another piece when we're talking about catalytic development is phasing in public improvements, public-private investment, right? And then you have more private development that follows. And then the third case study is the largest market hall we looked at. It's owned and will be operated by Kana. It is very deeply subsidized and will be ongoing by Kana. They're a missioned organization. And so there's vendors on the ground floor, offices and services on the second floor. It's about 65,000 square feet. It is also in the downtown. So as we would do it here, it is a revitalization effort as well as an economic development engine. I think what's interesting about this is the very hands-on nature that the organization is taking to find and tend to vendors. They're going to be trying to charge up to $3 a square foot, which is more than they're getting in Kodiak now and more than we're getting here. But it's over time. They're ramping up and they're finding different ways of making it affordable to folks now and giving them technical assistance to help ensure their success going forward. Mm-hmm.
I was just going to say, we've actually worked with that group. We actually helped put together the economic development organization over there in Korea, in fact, 4 or 5 years ago. And one of the approaches that they have, which I think is a really smart approach, is they're almost taking it like an incubator.
Mm-hmm.
And how when, like with us, we've got our 30-acre facility, and what we try and do is it's more important to us to make sure that business is successful to a point where then we can push them out of the nest, like driving school, and now they have their own facility that they're going to do their grand opening tomorrow. So I think it's a different philosophy when you do it that way. And the only thing that I throw out there that not only did they deal with over at Kodiak, but we deal with it on a daily basis. Sometimes when for-profit businesses hit a wall on something, the first group they want to go after is a group like ours saying, well, if you weren't subsidizing them, the for-profit businesses, the private businesses would be more successful. So it's just trying to keep that balance. And it's just something to be aware of. They are looking at, and they are working on the same philosophy as the incubator, which makes a lot of sense.
Going back to example number 2, how much government involvement is there in that, other than providing the land, the day-to-day operation, anything else?
So day-to-day operations, no involvement, no ongoing operations funding, sometimes because they own the land and I think they have some interest in the building also. They may do capital projects from time to time. but they don't provide operating funding.
Thank you.
And I guess I'll also add, there's optionality there too. If the city wanted to have a medium level of ongoing investment, you could own the land and provide a ground lease, and then the building is what the building is. If you also own the building and you're leasing the building, you're gonna have ongoing maintenance and capital repair obligations because you have an interest in making sure that that building maintains over its life cycle. So sort of figuring out early days how deeply you want to be in is going to be one of those key questions, and there will be different ramifications. And I personally like control, and when I was in local government, it was one of my favorite things to have. But when you have it, that also means you have to pay for things and do things. So there's a downside to that as well. Okay, so that was the case studies. Now to the folks in Soldotna and what we heard from them. We talked to several people in your community, and I think sort of the top line thing we heard was yes, please. We're excited, right? And eager. And then things get actually more interesting. They had a lot of thoughts about what it should be and what it should not be. And I'm going to start with the bottom. It would be the worst to be so expensive and only seasonally used. So this concept of year-round access is really important. And so what that also means is accessible to residents and visitors alike, right? And then if it's too expensive and really uniformly, it wasn't just expensive for the people using it, the residents and visitors, it was expensive for the tenants too, right? They want to make sure that this is accessible and affordable space for small businesses. That was a very important through line through all of our conversations. Vibrancy, accessibility for all ages, something for everybody. Celebrating what is unique about Soldotna. You don't want a Subway in your food hall, right? You want to have local businesses that celebrate what Soldotna has to offer. I mean, we could extend it to Kenai too, I suppose. And then really this other piece of supporting the business ecosystem. So right now we're just talking about 85 acres of Soldotna, but your business community is citywide. And so just because you're not in this 85 acres doesn't mean they're not interdependencies in that business ecosystem. And so it's really important to be thinking about not only where they're located, but where in their phase of business development they're at. And that's why when we talk about anchor businesses and micro businesses, established businesses, and little businesses that just want to grow or fledged, like you were talking about in the incubator concept. You not only want to have the nest for them to be able to prove out concept and really begin to learn how they can do their thing and have a supportive environment to do that, you also want to have a place for them to go. And that's key, because if they can't grow, they're going to stagnate. And so the idea fundamentally about the market hall is that it's a nest, it's a gathering place. Maybe you, depending on how much you lean into the incubator concept, maybe it's a place where you cultivate business, but then they need places to go. And that's really great, because the anticipated full build out of your concept plan has more places for people to go. They just need to be able to afford the rent. So as you rise up that group of folks and make them more stable, they are able then to move into different locations, but they're not all going to be in this 85 acres. They might need something different. And that's why you need to be thinking about the rest of your ecosystem in the city and then in the rest of the peninsula. So what we talked about all the possibilities. That included the commissary kitchen. Event space was clear. A mix of restaurants and retail and services. You could have a service provider or government office space. I think the visitor center is an example of what could be there. There was also some conversation about shared office space for the retail tenants particularly. Absolutely critical. You got to have a place for people to sit and eat the food. But you don't need necessarily, this is where you eat my food and this is where you eat that food. It's this like kind of communal open space where I can get stuff over here, you can get stuff over there, and we can sit together and eat. This is also part of that concept of multi-purpose space. You know it has to be good for eating. And that means it also has to be good for talking and listening. And so you'll want to be thinking about acoustics. You may also want it to be available to push the tables to the side or put them in a closet and have a larger event. Then the acoustics become even more critical. It doesn't help if you can't hear the other humans in the room because the din is so loud. We talked about how is this accessible to children, right? And so everything from, oh, could you just have like an indoor playground, to also, can you make this not dangerous for children or nerve-wracking for parents trying to keep hold of their children? And then art is another piece. How are there places for public art? Are there places for putting up gallery showings? So you want lots of windows and transparency so people can see the vitality, but there are also places where you might want to have some blank space or movable walls where you can set up for some art as well. Okay. So these are all of the things, but you are not going to have all of the things unless, I don't know, somebody comes with the like 14 bucket loads of cash. And so you're going to need to prioritize what makes the most sense for your community in this location, right? So for example, that commissary kitchen, does it need to be in the market hall itself? Or could it be somewhere else? It's definitely been an identified need, but where it is located is a question for further discussion. What we deduce from our conversations is that these are sort of the minimal critical elements: affordable restaurant and retail space for local businesses, at least one anchor tenant, and that multi-use space that can shift with need. And I guess I would say purposefully designed multi-use space. And then a building is just a building unless it's enlivened. And so we're going to talk a little bit about programming. Here are some ideas about a potential tenant mix. This is not what we're recommending should be in. It's the ideation phase of what it means to be an anchor tenant, right? So it could be a local grocery, it could be a brewery, it could be a restaurant that's open most of the day. We want something that people will come to and that they have reliability knowing that it will be open. And then you fill in with any of those things on the right and more, right? All of the ideas that you can think about that would be attractive to residents and visitors. Or residents or visitors. Not everything has to be appealing to all the people, right? But the mix that you end up with that should be purposefully curated, sort of an overused word, but it is true. You want to really be purposeful in how you tenant the building, particularly when you open. It will obviously change. It may change in 3 months of opening. It may change. It will definitely change within 18 months of opening. But you want to set your stage and show your community what it is that you're trying to do. And the good news is the mayor doesn't need to do it all by himself. There are people in the community who are already so eager and interested in helping. and taking leadership positions in making this come to pass. So, and this may be obvious, operating a market hall is a really complicated, tricky, political in a different way activity. There are a lot of, there's a lot of hand holding and also tough love that needs to happen in a space like this. And so you need somebody who knows already what they are doing, and you are in luck. You have multiple people who already have varied, so not the same experience, but deep experience, who are interested and eager to help out. You also have a bunch of potential partners, and I think the chamber should be on that list as well, who are potential tenant finders, tenant supporters, cheerleaders, helpers, and then, of course, the city of Soldotna. I think it is fair to say that this will not come to pass if the city is not a very active partner. And so that's one of the things that you all need to consider is this something that you want to bite off and chew? And you don't need to, put all your money on red today. There are definitely baby steps that you can take, but at some point, if it's going to come to pass, it's really going to come to pass because the city of Soldotna says, yes, we're going to do this thing. Now, programming. Again, this is the ideation slide for programming. We're not saying these are the things that you must have, but what we are saying is if you don't want this to be a dead building, you got to have programming. It's like one of your community members said, events are essential, vendors and food are not enough. And I think that is absolutely true and proven out in all of the case studies. And there's everything. There's so many things that you can do that will be fantastic. When a visitor decides to take a left and come in and see the park and then sees somebody playing the guitar and somebody playing the fiddle outside, that's magic, right? You can't have better advertising for a market hall than that, especially if there's 4 or 5 kids dancing around. It's that kind of thing that will really make the difference, not only for the visitor who is enchanted, but for the kid who lives there and gets to have that benefit. I think the last thing I'll say about this is social isolation and loneliness are killing Americans. And these kinds of activities and these kinds of places are an antidote to that. And for me, that is equally as important as the economic development benefit that you can absolutely gain by having a place like this here. So your business community is an ecosystem, and a market hall and this riverfront redevelopment is just a portion of that ecosystem. And so there are very specific things that you can and we would recommend doing if you decide to make a market hall. Ensuring affordability is number one. That means you got to find a way to pay for it. Everybody would make it affordable if it was easy. So this is no small task, but we think it's a critical element. But it's not the only thing. You already have a storefront improvement program. You could pair that with a tenant improvement program so that both the inside and the outside, there's support. Coordinating the services, you've got a lot of helpers here, right? Who are willing and eager and able. How do you make sure that web of services is interconnected? That's a role that you all already play and could continue to play. And then that commissary kitchen came up again and again. So whether it's in the market hall or it's in an existing commercial kitchen or one that you help adapt, it's something that we've identified as, at least hearing from the community, something that is a need. In short, none of this is done in isolation. You want mixed use buildings. They're great. I love them. You want to have businesses that are thriving. That's amazing. You want to have people who can continue to live here and call this home, right? They need some affordability, right? And in order to be able to do that. And so it's sort of acknowledging the interdependencies and the tensions that can result from any action and responding in a way that makes sense for your community. So some key considerations and takeaway for the market hall. It comes back again and again, right? Y'all are lucky to have the community members that you do. You're smart, you're scrappy, right? You can do the things. And I think that's an asset that not all communities have. All communities have good people, right? I think that's pretty true. But Soldotna has this entrepreneurial spirit and capacity and experience that is worth mentioning and leaning into. Even though I said this isn't going to happen without the city of Soldotna, also you can't do it alone, and you probably shouldn't, right? And so it's this relationships and partnerships are absolutely essential to success, because government can do some things very well, private market can do things very well, and nonprofits can do many things very well. And it's how do you find where your skills and capacities are best suited to accomplish a shared goal. It's pretty fun to do it. It's also requires a lot of communication and sort of self-awareness and self-examination about what we can do and what we don't know that we can do. Absolutely, you want to have champions. You want the community to feel like owners of the place, which means it will take longer and sometimes be frustrating. But it will also mean, if done well, that it is a community asset and much more successful than it would be if it was done in isolation. And then other things like we've said already, design matters. You don't want to just throw up 4 walls and a roof, right? You really do want to think about it. And this doesn't mean you want the most expensive thing. I really honestly believe that that you should do it a little bit scrappy, a little bit raw, and beautiful, right? I think you can do both of those things, but not flashy and not super expensive. But do think about acoustics particularly, and make sure your key elements that you know need to be done well are done well, and don't make just like fuzzy spaces that don't work well for anything. And then for the reason you hired us, this can also serve as a very significant catalyst for redevelopment and downtown activation. The fact is, right, you're not going to get likely a mixed use redevelopment in the short term. If you want to have active retail and commercial in this area in the short term, this is very likely your best bet. So I've already started going down this slide. Your pros, your talent. It provides retail that you might not get otherwise, unless, and this is really an important piece, unless one of your existing property owners has a desire and the capacity to do it now, right? And so that will be one of the next steps that we recommend. Is we've done a prototypical analysis of what is possible, but you have real live property owners with real live circumstances, right? And what in partnership you can do with them is wholly different from what a prototypical analysis will tell you. This market hall could serve as a catalyst, and critically, it supports small businesses, and not only to meet current demand, but also to be a pipeline for the future retail when you start getting that mixed use development. Okay, and the cons. There are many. We only listed 3, but they're big. It is hard. It is expensive. It will take time. it might not work, right? And you won't be able to do as many other things that you might also want to do, right? You already know from the field house, right? When you bite off something big, you got to swallow, right? And this is one of those things. And that's why understanding what it is that you're getting into, being really clear with your community, building those relationships aren't only a good idea, they're really critical to success. But before you even do that, you all as a group need to talk with your staff and really figure out, do you even want to dip your toe in, right? And it's totally fine to dip your toe in and then pull it right back out after you figure out some next steps. But having that conversation and then being clear with community, we're dipping our toe in, we might pull it right back out, right? Then everybody is clear what's happening. And I think everybody respects when people are clear and they acknowledge what they can or can't do. Okay, that was a lot. So to recap, to stimulate development in the near term, yeah, I think really, unless it's just townhomes, it's going to be public-private partnerships. We have some ideas about that. Definitely the city might need to be in the game of more public improvements, streets, utilities, trails, parks, that kind of thing. And then absolutely, you're going to want to consider the timing and phasing of each of those kinds of investments and how the city leans into them and when. So I think you've seen this slide before too. Really, we think that phase one is a package. There's something synergistic about all of them together. They might not all happen simultaneously, but thinking of them as a package, the market hall, townhome development, affordable housing. And I think I'm going to stop here on affordable housing and talk for a second. So we'll just say, and trails, streets, and waterfront amenities, you know all about that. So when I'm talking about affordable housing, we didn't include a slide here, but I will send John some pictures. What I'm talking about is a low-income housing tax credit project where you get federal grant money, or an affordable housing developer does, to make something beautiful. And so in my own personal experience, when I worked for a city in Oregon, I had the job of trying to revitalize a downtown. And I couldn't get developers to come. I couldn't get banks to think it was possible that we could have a 3-story building that had ground floor retail. Our downtown had 1-story and 2-story stuff. Nothing had been built new for a long time. But I believed it could be done. And there were a lot of indicators that said it should. We had light rail right there. I mean, there were 1,000 reasons why anybody would want it to happen. But the bank said no, and the private developer said no. And so what we did first is we worked with an affordable housing developer and a for-profit developer. And for the affordable housing, we said, we want a 3-story to 4-story building, and we want it to be beautiful. And they went and they got tax credits for it. And then we helped them, and also the private developer, and they built an adjacent sister project next door that was a 3-story building, actually with a market hall, a small market hall on the ground floor. Today, if you go there, you cannot tell which project is the market rate apartments. It's because they're both beautiful. And what happened was, now it's a mixed income little block. Folks can work there in the retail. Some of them can afford to live there. Seniors on fixed incomes can live there. Working families can live there. And so the reason I'm telling you this story is because you're not going to get, without help, 3-story development in this district right now. So instead of leaning in hard into subsidizing a market rate development that's going to charge $2.30 for rent for an apartment, maybe you could lean into an equally beautiful affordable housing project where some seniors or working families can live, and you're getting the development type that you're looking for that starts to prove out the place. Anyway, I could talk about that for a long time. Phase 2, encourage a hotel with restaurant. Also promote adaptive reuse. And this could be phase 1. And that's why when we talk about next steps, what are your property owners who have buildings in the area that are maybe underutilized right now, that if they had some investment could be something different and maybe pretty special. And then phase 3, once you start building out your streets, building out your trail network, you've got some energy that's built off the Soldotna Creek Park, and you've got some development. You're seeing a little bit of scale maybe with a 3 or 4 story affordable housing project. Now, right? Now you've got Steve over there thinking it's possible, we can do this. And not only do I think it's possible, but the numbers show that it's possible. And now you've got stuff going. So next steps. We've talked about most of these already, but I think they bear mentioning again. It's all about relationships. I talked to Jeanette and Laura and John a lot about there are big things you can do and maybe should do, like help catalyze a market hall, but there are smaller things that you can do too. How do you make sure developers know you're open for business? How do you reduce the friction in doing business in Soldotna? What are the amenities that you make? I think you're going to hear later a public art plan, a master plan, right? How do you make your town beautiful? The signs in the entry of and exit of your town show that you're a place. How do you do those kinds of things that make folks who might be interested in investing know that this is the place where they want to put their money? This concept plan itself shows you're developing a roadmap for a vision for how you want your city to build out. What to do next? If you're going to buy property, you probably want to do it before you make it more expensive. That's, as someone who likes control, that is my advice to you. Always consider how you're going to balance affordability and new development. Long-term, you want Soldotna residents, whether they make a lot of money or don't make a lot of money, to be able to enjoy the place that they call home. And how are you going to do that? If you're going to lean into making an amazing place here, which I personally think is a fantastic idea, how are you going to mitigate the potential negative downsides of doing that? There's lots of things that you can do, and we can talk more about that. Go find the money, right? You don't have to do it all on your own. There are other funding sources out there. The EDA is one of them. And there are others, both public and philanthropic, that might be available to you, and find all the money. Find it. Determine whether you really want to pursue a market hall. You don't have to. You really don't. And if you decide you want to, be thoughtful about that, right? And make sure be methodical in how you go about doing that. At some point, you're going to just have to plug your nose and take the leap. But there are many, many steps before you need to do that. And then develop a phasing plan, not only for your infrastructure investments, but actually all of your investments, time and money and otherwise. And then the big orange sign. We're going to talk more about this. This is an intermediate step. The next step really is providing some more details into what an implementation plan might look like. All right, that's it, folks. I have so many thoughts, but there are a few locations that could be good. The Davis site comes to mind because of its proximity to Soldotna Creek Park. And so like building on the synergy of the Wednesday market, that indoor, outdoor. There's something beautiful about that. There are other properties kind of moving towards the bridge that might be good for that. You have to be a little careful, though, that if you start to create a new area where there's nothing yet, that's a little bit of an island. And so my instinct is to stay closer to where you already have a lot of energy, and that would be the park.
Another question then. Looking at the different size of the three projects that you presented, what do you feel is a good fit for our community?
I don't know. I honestly think you need to do more investigation about what is critical. What I'll say is it's going to be expensive, no matter how big it is, right? And then obviously the bigger it is, the more expensive it is. So as you expand out, have real reasons for making it bigger. Don't make it big for big's sake. Be very purposeful in the programming, and then also pair it with funding so that you can make it happen, not just to build it, but you are then also going to have to operate it. And so what is that? What is your operations plan long-term? And that will help sort of, you start with sort of idealized programming. We know this is what we really, really want. And then you figure out, can we afford it? Right? And then you begin to like do the very uncomfortable paring back. And if you don't find yourself paring back, you haven't tried hard enough. It really, honestly, it should hurt a little bit when you pare back, because then you know that you're really considering what it is you really need.
Mr. Carey.
Again, you've done a great deal of thinking on this, and I'm wondering, do you envision that part of this would be to have existing businesses and commercial interests that are now in the city move into this area? Or do you envision more new things that are not currently available?
I think you would definitely want to have some existing businesses move in. And you would want to have some new businesses.
That's very political. That's excellent. Yeah.
But no, I'm serious
No,
because, yeah, I just don't think brand new businesses, whether they're brand new to the area or brand new to business, all of them, that would be crazy making.
So per se, you wouldn't, I'm asking, not saying, would you envision that this would put other people out of business that are now in the city?
No.
I needed to hear that. Thank you.
Yeah.
Vice Mayor Parker.
Thank you, Mayor Whitney. Thank you for the presentation. And there's, and your enthusiasm for this is infectious. So there currently are a number of vacant buildings in Soldotna. And we have space. So has there been thought about taking and doing kind of like a trial program, using some of this empty space to see about doing a public market in that time frame from September to May?
That's a great idea. The only caution I would say is if it's wildly successful and people start to think of that as the location, it might need to stay in that location, which could be fine. It could be great. But then relocating to a new place and creating a new place with identity as the market hall might be a little bit of a hiccup.
I think within the 85 acres, there are some vacant spaces within that area that could be a possibility. Just
Yeah.
a thought.
Awesome. And if they are a possibility, you might want to just roll with that. Right? You don't have to build a new thing. If you already have a thing that can serve and function as what you want it to be, do that.
Anything else? In your studies here, as you probably realize, in the summertime, we have an issue with parking. Any thoughts on how to solve that if we went with a marketplace that was in a location where we lose parking?
I used to do parking, and so I might have very unpopular things to say. So, I think a parking problem is a great problem because that means you've got people coming to the same place. And to me, that's amazing. What I will say, on-street parking everywhere. Can you have on-street parking everywhere? Where can you make on-street parking happen? Free parking where you already have asphalt is awesome. Even if it makes people, even if it makes them drive more slowly because they have a slightly narrow drive aisle, right? You already want people to be slowing down where you have more pedestrians. I've also built a public parking garage, and I will tell you, they're very expensive and they take a lot of energy to operate. So you could do that too, but I would do that last. Honestly, I would rather say, find a large big box retailer who has a lot of parking and lease some of it, maybe, or even honestly, lease other existing vacant land and make that a parking lot, just not next to your river first.
Any other comments? Vice Mayor
Well,
Parker.
we do have a lot of parking spaces at the Sports Center in the summertime. And the potential to use that for parking and run a shuttle back and forth. I mean, that's a potential business that somebody could set up.
Yeah, I don't think there's really a lack of parking in Soldotna. There's a lack of parking exactly right where you want it to be when you're going to the thing.
Well,
Yeah.
hopefully when the field house gets built, there won't be any parking around there except between midnight and 5 a.m. or something.
There you go. Yeah, or a lack of sharing problem, right? And I think that's, I moved it, but that goes back to the relationships bit, right? Do you have a retailer that closes at 5? Do you have a bank that closes? Do you have, right? Or do you have some entities that are overparked that also want to make a buck, right? Or trade, right? How do you have more cooperation among property owners with parking? No, people love their parking. They live and die by it. And if they don't need it and there's a way to cross-pollinate or share, and the city can serve as a facilitator for that, even if honestly you have to lease it to make it happen, way cheaper than building the parking garage.
Mr. Dillon.
Funding, it all comes down to dollars and cents. A lot of it comes down to dollars and cents. And going back to what Dave said earlier, quality of living. And first of all, I think excellent presentation and data. But when you're trying to evaluate some of this stuff, remember the EDA and funding. If you retain a job or create a job, they're interested. So if you wind up with a couple of experienced businesses moving to a marketplace, that's not a bad thing from a funding standpoint, because you can document that as retaining that job and then the creation of the other jobs. The other thing is, I've worked with AHFC for years, and probably Lisa's probably the only person here that knows this, but back at UAA, when we put the dormitories together over there, that was through AHFC. They do a lot of creative things around the state. And I think if you all decide you want to pursue something like that, to get Butcher down here and sit down and just explain to them, hey, this is what we're looking to do. This is how we're trying to do it. Can we get creative?
you know, and this also has a flavor of Ada in there too. So you start looking at all those alphabet groups and there is potential funding if you think it through and you're very, very strategic on how you do it. And I can tell you from our standpoint, from KPED standpoint, you know, John is on our board. Whatever we can do to open those doors and create those relationships. And, you know, Jeanette has some of those already. And so, but whatever we can do to help those, but I would turn over those rocks as you're making those decisions and seeing what you may or may not want to do.
Well, thank you very much for the presentation. As I said, it was very informative, a lot of things to think about, and I think we'll be doing a lot of thinking over the next few months. I think we have another presentation coming up maybe in November or something,
I think that's right.
final report. So give us more to think about.
Thank you so much.
And so we'll go ahead and conclude this work session now and get ready to start the next one.
Extra on top. You ordered. I got another one, but we have. Yeah. So I know that's your house. I almost turned this, but I was like, that could be more anyway.
I was thinking about the same thing. I didn't feel like turning around. Or only volunteer.
You know, I thought about losing his hand, but then I thought. No, he was a. Yeah. I said, I know there were several players involved.
Yeah.
I would like to call the September 13th, 2023 City Council regular meeting to order. Will everyone please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Mr. Carey,
Present?
Mr. Chilson,
Present.
Ms. Hutchings,
Present.
Mr. Nelson,
Present.
Ms. Parker,
Yes, I'm here.
Ms. Wackler.
Present.
You have a quorum.
Thank you. May I have a motion to approve the agenda and consent agenda? Ms. Hutchings.
I'll approve, ask for approval of the agenda and consent agenda as presented.
And thank you, Mr. Carey, for the second. Are there any changes to the agenda, consent agenda? Would the clerk please read the consent agenda?
August 23rd, 2023 special council meeting minutes. August 23rd, 2023 council meeting minutes. Ordinance 2023-028 appropriating funds for HR assistant position sponsored by the city manager. Public hearing on September 27th. Resolution 2023-056 adopting the city of Soldotna's arts and culture master plan sponsored by the city manager. Resolution 2023-057 amending the FY24 authorized staffing table to reclassify the regular part-time HR assistant position to a regular full-time position sponsored by the city manager. Resolution 2023-058 authorizing the purchase of a 2024 Dodge Durango Pursuit AWD in the amount of $46,038.03 sponsored by the city manager. Resolution 2023-059, a resolution approving amendments to the City of Soldotna mobile device use policy sponsored by the city manager. Action Memorandum 2023-023, confirming the City of Soldotna student representative appointment sponsored by the city mayor. Action Memorandum 2023-024, request for an excused absence from the October 11th, 2023 regular city council meeting sponsored by Ms. Parker. Action Memorandum 2023-025, authorizing the city manager to enter into a contract with the Kenai Peninsula Youth Foundation doing business as Kenai River Brown Bears, sponsored by the city manager. That is your consent agenda.
Thank you. Are there any public comments, on any of the items just read by the clerk? For those participating through Zoom, please raise your hand if you would like to comment. App users by pressing the raise your hand button and phone participants by dialing *9 on your telephone. Is there anyone in the audience wishing to speak on any item the clerk just read? Seeing none, we'll take a look at Zoom.
Joe Kesha raised his hand.
Oh, didn't see you over there. Mr. Kashai, please state your name and address for the record.
Thank you, Joe Cashman, name and address, Soldotna. I will be very brief. I provided some thoughts as to the implementation of the city comprehensive arts plan. In this packet, there was a summary page. I speak in favor of adopting the plan, but with reservations as to how it will be ultimately implemented. And I would just urge that the city consider retaining its fiduciary and legal responsibilities that it take into account and develop appropriate policies to how the city will do that in terms of actual implementation. I've set out my own thoughts. I've been active, obviously, in the city for over 40 years as an attorney in private practice in the arts in the area for over 20 both in terms of management as well as practicing. And I'm very passionate about the city's long-term economic development and development as a community. And I think that both the riverfront and the arts plan are critical to that long-term 21st century economic and community development. I do think, however, that we need to consider carefully how we're going to implement them. My thoughts from the experience I mentioned are set forth in your packet that I submitted. And I would simply ask the city, as it adopts the plan on its consent agenda, to later then consider how it's actually going to implement for maximum practical benefit.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Any questions or comments from the council? Saying none, we will take that and definitely, I'm sure the administration will be considering that. Anyone else in the audience? Seeing none, I'll take a look at Zoom. And I see no hands raised, though I do see Mr. Chilson on here.
Oh, I'd connected in earlier so that I don't have to turn my head to see the TV.
Okay. I also say Kmart on here, which I'm not quite sure about. So we'll go back to the, having no one wishing to, having no one else wishing to speak, the approval of the agenda and consent agenda is back before the council. Any objections? Seeing none, the agenda and consent agenda are approved by unanimous consent. At this time, the city clerk, Blankenship, will now give newly appointed student representative Cassidy his oath of office. Congratulations. Congratulations and welcome back for another term. Moving on to the next agenda item, which is number 4, public comments and presentations. Are there any members of the public who would like to speak on any item not appearing on the agenda? For those appearing through Zoom, please raise your hand if you would like to comment. App uses by pressing the raise your hand button, and phone participants by dialing *9 on your telephone. Is there anyone in the audience wishing to speak on any item not appearing on the agenda? Thank you, and you'll have 3 minutes, and please state your name and address for the record.
There you go, it's on. The light doesn't work.
City used to publish meetings. It used to publish meetings and things. This language is very kind to me that it has to be. Always been very professional. That the city no longer does. Now, I knew some of my associates worked for planning and zoning. Last week, so I said, well, surely there has to be a city council meeting tonight. So I stopped by here and about 2 weeks at my office. So I got on the truck and started taking a seat, and then on the top, it's sitting 4:30. There may be people that would like to know. Now, as Mr. Blankenship said, when the city was trying to doing that, was very safe. If I see what we used to do, I realized the papers on 2 days a week. But I see, United States of the world, first December. You're right. City is about those that are right. Makes it better. That's the word.
Thank you, Mr. Lynch. Anyone else in the audience wishing to speak on any item not on the agenda? Seeing none, I will look at Zoom. And I see no hands raised in Zoom. We'll move on to the next agenda item, which is number 5, Assembly and Legislative Report. Are there any representatives from the borough or the state in attendance who would like to speak? For those participating through Zoom, please raise your hand if you would like to comment. App users by pressing the raise your hand button, and phone participants by dialing *9 on your telephone. I see no one from the Borough Assembly or the state here in the chambers, and I see none on the Zoom. So we'll move on to the next item on the agenda, number 6, public hearings. Ordinance 2023-027, amending portions of Soldotna Municipal Code 3.06, financial control to provide for certain procurement authority and to increase procurement limits, introduced by Councilmember Nelson. May I have a motion to enact? Mr. Nelson,
Thank you. I'll move to enact ordinance 2023-027.
may I have a second, please?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Carey. A report from Councilmember Nelson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This ordinance came as a result of discussions with the administration, and I'd certainly like to ask our city manager if you have anything to add to please do so. Essentially what this came out of, there's a couple different issues here. One is a lot of our purchasing code is outdated. It's a little bit old. There's a lot of references to actions that the city council could take that really in practice, we have a city manager, we have a finance staff that's very good at this, and they're the ones that manage this on a day-to-day basis. So that cleans up that code section and also provides what I was hoping for was a little bit of efficiency, maybe a little bit less bureaucracy in this process. There's just a lot of extra things in there, and so as we look even tonight's consent agenda, we're approving a police vehicle. A few meetings ago, we had several items approving water treatment chemicals. Those are things our department heads should be able to handle without council approval. This is only for items and things that we've done in the budget or we've previously moved on. So for folks listening in the public, this doesn't remove any sort of controls. The council has already taken action on these and done it through the budget process or through another process. So it's really administratively to give our staff the ability to take care of those things. And so that would change that limit. Currently, those items that are $20,000 or more have to come before council. That was done in 2005. Inflation being what it is, that's changed. This action would change that to 50,000. So essentially giving our employees and our department heads a little bit more tools to do that in-house. And I'd certainly like to ask City Manager Bauer, if you have anything to add, please feel free, but that's my report.
Would the city manager like to add anything to that?
I wrote some notes and you covered all of my notes. Thank you.
Are there any members of the public who would wish to speak on this item? For those participating through Zoom, please raise your hand if you would like to comment. App users by pressing the raise your hand button, and phone participants by dialing *9 on your telephone. Is there anyone in the audience wishing to speak on ordinance 2023-027? Seeing none, we'll take a look at Zoom, and I see no hands raised there. Having no one else who wishes to speak, the item is back before the council. Are there any council comments? Vice Mayor Parker.
Thank you, Mayor Whitney. A question for Councilmember Nelson. Why did you decide on 50,000? The clerk I asked her what other communities do, and Seward's got a 30,000, the borough's at 40. Kenai's at 35, Homer's at 25. Why did you pick 50?
Thank you. And again, for the city manager, if you'd like to add anything, please feel free. I know that the city went through and looked at the different procurement limits and looked at the different aspects of, what our neighboring jurisdictions do. I think 50 is reasonable. That generally takes care of, most routine vehicles, most routine purchases. Quite frankly, we had a discussion at one point. I mean, my initial idea was to take that section out completely because again, we've already approved these things, but there is something to be said for the publicity of, looking at these big purchases, letting the public see what the city is doing. So I felt that with administration that 50 was a good point. And I don't know if you have anything to add, but that's kind of where we ended up landing on that.
Yes, in discussions, we landed on that, and also, thank you for bringing out the section that was not, something that I wanted to do, and we worked together to resolve that. I still felt that way it became still public, so, thank you.
You have anything for Vice Mayor Parker? Anything else from the council? I do have one question for the administration. Can the council be apprised of what contracts are approved, maybe on a quarterly basis that are under that $50,000 limit, so we at least know what's going on?
Yes, we will add that to the process and bring that before them.
Anything else? Okay, may we call for the vote?
Wackler,
Yes.
Carrie,
Yes.
Nelson,
Yes.
Chilson,
Yes.
Parker,
Yes.
Hutchings,
Yes.
Cassidy.
Yes.
You have 6 yes votes.
Ordinance 2023-027 passes on a 6-0 vote. Moving on to the next agenda item is new business, and it'll be resolution 2023-055, authorizing the city manager to enter into a contract for construction of the Soldotna Fieldhouse with Criterion General Incorporated in the amount of $14,064,807, introduced by the city manager. May I have a motion to adopt? Vice Mayor Parker.
Thank you, Mayor Whitney. I move to enact resolution 2023-055, authorizing the city manager to enter into a contract for the construction of Soldotna Fieldhouse with Criterion General Inc. in the amount of $14,064,807.
May I have a second, please? Ms. Hutchings. Report from the administration.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We are very excited to bring this before you, for obvious reasons, to be able to complete this project, and also that it is well under the engineer's estimates. And we have the ability to award this contract financially as well. Kyle is on a vacation this week, and CO is here to speak to any specific questions you have about the field house and what is included in the bid. And as we've talked about before, the additive alternatives were the parking, the required parking and landscaping by code. If you have further questions, I'm going to defer those to CO, who can speak to the field house itself.
Thank you. Are there any members of the public who wish to speak on this item? For those participating through Zoom, please raise your hand if you would like to comment. App users by pressing the raise your hand button, and phone participants by dialing *9 on your telephone. Is there anyone here in the audience wishing to speak on resolution 2023-055? Seeing no one, I'm taking a look at Zoom and I see no hands raised there. Having no one wishing to speak on the item, it's back before the council. Are there any council comments? Vice Mayor Parker.
Thank you, Mayor Whitney. I am extremely pleased that we received 5 bids, 5 solid bids, and they were all within the same range. So it wasn't where there was somebody that was real low and then there was an outlier with somebody being extremely high. And that the company that is going to be awarded this contract has constructed similar buildings in the state of Alaska. And I look forward to working with them, and hopefully after they break ground and get underway, that like we do with the Soldotna Chamber of Commerce, get quarterly reports. Maybe they'll come give us quarterly reports on how things are going with the construction of the field house, because this is a big deal for this area, not just for Soldotna, but for the entire Central Peninsula.
Ms. Bauer.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. We will commit to making that happen. And also, the clerk's office will contact you. We will be doing a groundbreaking and contact you regarding the dates and the coordination of the groundbreaking.
Any other comments from the council? I'd just like to say I am very, very happy with this bid. I'm very happy that we're going to get started on this project, and that I would hope by, well, I'll be not too optimistic, but by the summer of 2025, we will be in the building and we will be doing lots of fun things, and a lot of our kids will be in there using the facility, and it'll be a great asset to our community. So call for the vote.
Hutchings,
Yes.
Wackler,
Yes.
Carrie,
Yes.
Nelson,
Yes.
Chilson,
Yes.
Parker,
Yes.
Cassidy.
Yes.
You have 6 yes votes.
And I'm pleased to say Resolution 2023-055 passes on a 6-0 vote. Moving on to the next item on the agenda is, we're down to Mayor Council Report. I have a proclamation I would like to read here that I will be signing and issuing tonight. Whereas protecting the health and wellness of Alaskans is key to ensuring a stronger future for our families and communities. And whereas suicide is the most tragic consequence of mental and emotional illness and distress, and is one of the top 10 causes of death in our state, occurring in Alaska at a rate twice the national average. And whereas Alaska has a high rate of many risk factors for suicide, which include a previous suicide attempt, substance abuse, feelings of hopelessness or isolation, access to lethal means, physical or sexual abuse, history of mental health disorders such as clinical depression, lack of access to mental health treatment services, and chronic pain or serious physical illness, veteran-related trauma, or incarceration. And whereas it is critical that all Alaskans watch for these signs and take action if they are concerned about a friend, family member, or a loved one, because individuals of all ages are at risk for suicide. And whereas because mental illness and suicide may often be stigmatized, discouraging those at risk from seeking the help they desperately need, every individual should be treated with respect and compassion. And whereas the state of Alaska is actively working to ensure agencies and personnel are equipped to offer help and support to those in need through the Alaska Statewide Suicide Prevention Council, which provides outreach and education, and the Alaska Division of Behavioral Health's community-based suicide prevention program, which supports communities in promoting resilience and training Alaskans in basic prevention techniques. And whereas for veterans seeking help with post-traumatic stress disorder or suicidal ideation, call the Veterans Crisis Line at 988, then press 1. And whereas if you think someone needs help, the right thing to do is ask. Ask if they are thinking about ending their life. Share that you care, then keep them company until you connect with them. Connect them with Caroline, Alaska, other suicide prevention resources, or someone they trust. Now therefore, I, Paul J. Whitney, Mayor of the City of Soldotna, do hereby proclaim September 2023 as Suicide Prevention Month in Soldotna, and encourage all Soldotna residents to take this opportunity to speak up if they know someone who may be contemplating suicide, or to seek help if they are in need, and to reaffirm their commitment to community, family, and life. Next item I have here is this says Thursday, but I think it's Friday. Verizon ribbon cutting ceremony at 4 p.m. At the new Verizon store that's opening in the strip mall where urgent care used to be. That will be, well, this is Thursday, but I think my note said Friday at 4 o'clock. I had the opportunity to attend a 10th anniversary for the pastor at the Pentecostal church. He's been there at that church now for 10 years, and they recently moved into the new facility there at that's Marydale and the Spur Highway. A nice opportunity. And Monday, I had the opportunity to attend a Catholic church discussion on possibly opening up a Catholic school here in Soldotna. It's been something that's been under discussion for a number of years, and there's a group now that looking at it again, and hopefully maybe it'll happen. And sadly to say, I offer my condolence and sympathy to the family of Representative Peltola, who lost her husband today. A great shock to everyone. And I wish them all the sympathy and I'm sure the sympathy of the council and the city of Soldotna for that tragic loss. Unfortunately, airplane crashes have seemed to be a fact of life here in Alaska, and it can happen at any time to anyone. So next, moving on along, is council reports on boards and commission. Planning and Zoning Commission meeting on September 6th. Vice Mayor Parker.
Thank you, Mayor Whitney. Yes, the Planning Commission met. There was one replat of a property. There was an encroachment from an adjacent property owner, so they had to do a replat, and there were some comments made, and Jen was there about some changes that maybe the city should be looking at so that property owners don't have this issue come up in the future. During the meeting, there were a number of property owners from the River Terrace property that received their notices from the property owner, who came and expressed their concern, discussed the issues that they have had over the years with respect to delivery of services from their landlord. And we're looking for suggestions and ideas. There was a lot of discussion and empathy expressed to these property owners for the position that they're in, since there isn't a lot of affordable housing available for them, places to turn. Jen did suggest that they get together with the city manager, which they were able to do, and have a discussion. So I was expecting, because it was mentioned at that meeting, to let them know that we were meeting tonight, and I let them know that we had this meeting tonight, and I was hoping to see some of them come to the meeting tonight to express their concerns that they had shared with the Planning and Zoning Commission the other night. So it is an ongoing, developing issue.
Any questions for Vice Mayor Parker? Seeing none, we'll move on to item number 9, City Manager's Report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've included in your packet a report from regarding the Alaska Remote Seller Sales Tax Commission and the growth since implementation of the program. And there's significant growth in the users and participation in the program. Alaska, there are, 46 participating municipalities in the program and 3,334 registered sellers. And the tax revenue to date since implementation of the program is 55 million. The city of Soldotna in FY23 increased by 206,000, 43.7% over FY22. And the net total amount received by the city since the program's implementation is $1,257,223. This program has been very successful, and it is a tool that's been useful for obviously a lot of municipalities and the revenue. there are certain parameters put into the program regarding fees that are paid for the program. And when the program hits a certain level, the fees are reduced. And there's also reduction in the cost of implementation of the program, which is why the city received a rebate and almost $10,000 for FY '22. I included information about the jurisdictions, the growth, and the top sellers in the state that are remote sellers. I just wanted you to be aware of the program success and then how the growth continues to benefit our revenue along with the local shops and businesses. So I just wanted to include that information because there's been it's a successful program. On Wednesday, so on yesterday, it's hard to believe it was just yesterday, oral arguments were held before the Supreme Court, and thank you for the article in the Clarion. And we know this, but I just want to really emphasize the statewide importance of this, why this issue over annexation has gone to the Supreme Court, and that the city of Soldotna council member, mayor and council over the years and administration have recognized the importance of it because this is statewide implications for all municipalities. The way that the LBC changed direction could quite harm any municipality's ability to annex in the future. So at this time, as we know, we are waiting for the Supreme Court decision. It could be 6 months or longer. We just don't know. I spoke to Attorney Chandler regarding a memo that he is putting together. Asked him to put together a memo of overall his feelings of how it went and then next steps and what we should expect. That'll be coming to you shortly. Regarding, okay, the Arts and Culture Master Plan, thank you for your comments. They've been received. And thank you for the work by the staff, Laura, and by the Inger and company. Thank you so much. It is a good plan. I wanted to also then comment on local government service and our student reps. So I found through my peers, many of us kind of stumbled into local government service and never really planned to go that direction, but it did happen. And it's refreshing to see a young person become involved in local government service, whether, who knows, someday you'll be an elected official or a staff member like me. It's nice to have you here and I really appreciate that. Thank you, Vice Mayor, for your bringing up River Terrace. And I did have a meeting with a resident and we spoke about resources and next steps and where those resources could be had. And it is my understanding it is his desire to coordinate with the residents at the park. As I gather resources and information, I'll let you know, all of you, the council, and then the resident that I'm coordinating with as well. That's all I have.
Any questions for the city manager? Mr. Chilson.
Not a question for the city manager, but when we're done with this, can we circle back? I didn't get a chance to provide my report on the Parks and Recreation Advisory Board.
Try that one again.
Sorry, not a question for the manager. I was just asking when we're done with this section of the agenda, if we can circle back. I didn't get a chance to provide my report on the Parks and Recreation Advisory Board during council reports on boards and commissions.
You hear that?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Okay, because I can't hear him.
He wants to do.
He doesn't speak
Parks-
into the microphone.
Meeting.
I didn't get a chance to do my report on the Parks and Recreation Advisory Board.
Last meeting?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you. I'll try to be brief. We actually had a fairly light agenda with nothing on it. But the Parks and Recreation Advisory Board that met on September 7th had not met in some time. So we spent the majority of the meeting reviewing all of the recent ongoings in the Parks Department. There's quite a bit that the department has been up to this summer, and I can just provide just a brief overview of some of the things that have been happening. First of which, the department welcomed aboard Michaelan Randall as the new Assistant Director for Parks and Recreation, as Joel Todd has moved into the director position. There's a lot of discussion on the field house bid outcome and the riverfront redevelopment project, which I won't go into because I believe all the members of this council are fully up to speed on that. The Parks Department has received an $80,000 grant from the Department of Health to expand their mobile recreation event trailer. So this is something that they originally set up with skates to support winter programming out at Arc Lake. And with this new $80,000 grant, they're going to be purchasing a variety of different summer season related equipment like pump track stuff, skateboarding ramps, PE equipment, with the idea that this trailer can now offer year-round programming for kids in the community throughout our different parks and venues within the city limits. Additionally, there is a development this summer, which I think we talked about during the spring, where the city of Kenai is no longer running their ice during the summer season. And our Parks Department transitioned to putting ice down in the sports center as early as July this year. And that was very well received and successful throughout the summer season, and keeping our kids local rather than having to send them to Anchorage to train this year. Additionally, for ongoing projects, they're beginning the retreeing of the dog park. And then up at Arc Lake, they are bringing in more sand and picnic tables to further develop the Arc Lake recreational site. They're getting new equipment to help clear snow from the ice rinks. Traditionally, they've had to wait for the city streets department to finish use of that equipment and before handing it off to the Parks Department to use within their areas. And with this acquisition, they'll be more responsive and getting our facilities back open to the public following heavy snowfall rather than waiting a week or so as it sometimes takes. This summer has been a struggle for dealing with vandalism at Soldotna Creek Park. And it's been particularly difficult because our Parks Department has been short staffed. I want to say there is around 4 or 5 positions that have yet to be filled. But given that limitation, I think it's safe to say that our department has worked incredible work throughout the summer and produced some pretty incredible facilities and maintained them very well. And just incredible gratitude to their team. Lastly, Michaelan Randall, the new assistant director, one of her projects for the summer was a review of the Parks and Recreation Master Plan that was last updated, I believe, in 2014. In that plan, there was a pretty large list of goals that had been outlined, and she provided a very comprehensive spreadsheet that basically outlined all of the goals that were defined in that plan along with the current status of them. And it was really neat to see just how far our Parks Department has come over the last about decade in accomplishing the vast majority of those. So again, congratulations to them and all the fantastic work. And that concludes my report, and I'd be happy to stand for questions from any of the council members.
Any questions, comments from the council? I do have one quick one. Forgot to mention it earlier. It has to do with Parks and Rec. I was contacted by someone, about 10 days ago, regarding starting up the community schools program again. If I remember right, that went through Parks and Rec. So that may be something to be looking into again.
Mayor, could I speak to that when you're done?
I'm sorry?
I could speak to that when you're done. I raised my hand to comment on that.
Anything else for Mr. Chilson? Okay, we'll move on to next is public comments. Members of the public will have 3 minutes to comment.
Mayor, I would like to speak if
Oh.
that's available. Can I speak now about the Parks and Rec question that
Okay,
you just
Go
had?
ahead then.
Okay, so jumping into bouncing off of Jordan Chilson finishing up his Parks and Rec comments, and then also adding to Mayor's question about community schools, I actually had that comment come up during the candidate forum. And then I brought it up with Joel and spoke with the city manager, and we actually ended up going over to meet with Joel to ask the question specific to community schools, what stopped the program, kind of what led to sort of the end of it, what pitfalls there were restarting it up. And we had a lengthy discussion about where it he helped inform the city manager because she was not aware of the program about what the history of that program was. And I know a lot of people in this room remember the history of the program. It was a joint program with Kenai Peninsula Borough School District using their property. And it was a nice, vibrant program for many years. The problem was space, I think initially, along with shifting in access to community members and developing that idea in social media and stuff like that. There stopped being as much activity with extended periods of classes and having more one-off classes, such as art classes that were more sip and paint style. So along with us losing the space through the Kenai Peninsula Borough School District, there were some issues with, utilizing space that teachers had ownership over, and being able to get into the school became a little bit more difficult. We also had a shifting of employees through Parks and Rec. Carmen was the one that ran that program. And then after she left, certain people kind of they're the ones that champion a program, and when they go, it just kind of falls to the wayside. And then COVID happened as well in the midst there as well. So all that kind of shifted. I don't believe that the program itself will come back as its name. It won't be a community schools. We discussed the possibility of using the Parks and Rec department to create more areas where we could have more activities along that vein. And they are going to use the sports center building as they're offering one class. It's the skin sewing class, skin and fur sewing class will be offered coming up. And that's sort of a testing ground. If that one goes well, they may be able to add more classes. And then also with that, Parks and Rec is developing more, their calendar they'll be utilizing a new calendar, which should have a lot easier access to programming, things like that, for community members to be able to view them. And then if things happen, cancellations, things like that, their old program that they had with mailing out those booklets, it just wasn't conducive to all the changes that were happening. And if someone shows up to an event and it's canceled and there's no way to let people know, it just kind of snowballed into something that happens once and you lose someone, and then so on and so forth. But if we can have more, hopefully this new calendar that should be going live soon should help facilitate more programs being available in one-off sort of scenarios like that. And then we really talked at length about different opportunities and ways that we could utilize community buildings, maybe the field house offices, if we can get more of those adult and child education programs going. I think that I just don't know that we'll be able to do the community schools program like it was before. And we also discussed the possibility of an art space. Really, there's the idea of getting sort of more 501c3s that maybe could plan things like that the city could help facilitate without Parks and Rec being the ones that take full ownership of designing those programs. So if that's a big, giant, long report of the meeting that we had with Joel.
Thank you. Move on to the next item on the agenda is public comments. Members of the public will have 3 minutes to comment. Is there anyone from the public who wishes to comment? For those participating through Zoom, please raise your hand if you would like to comment. App users by pressing the raise your hand button, and phone participants by dialing *9 on your telephone. Anyone here in the audience wishing to speak? Yep. Thank you, Mr. Lynch. Anyone else in the audience wishing to comment? Seeing none, I will take a look at Zoom and I see no hands raised there. Moving on to the next agenda item is council comments. And we will start out with our new student, our repeat student representative, Mr. Cassidy.
All right. Well, I'm glad to be back. I hope I didn't miss too much over the summer. Well, so far, High's doing well this year. We just last weekend had our homecoming dance for the year. I wasn't able to attend, or I didn't attend. But according to those who did, it went really well. This year, we were able to get a DJ in there. We were able to order a lot of decorations beforehand. And so, according to many testimonies of my peers, it went very smoothly. Obviously, as with any event, there are bumps and rides we need to smooth out, but that's just how it is. Our sports are going well. Both our football and our volleyball teams are doing exceptionally well this season. Our cross country team, our girls team is doing great. Our guys team is growing. I'll leave that there. Beyond that, all of the students seem to be doing pretty well. The new freshmen, I think, are getting along with each other decently well, as well as freshmen can. I've got a brother in that class, so my opinions are biased. Other than that, the school district is doing pretty well. I'm glad to be here so that I can hear about these issues in our community, because so many of the kids my age, older or younger, don't have any idea what goes on here. They don't even know that we have a mayor. I found that out just a few years ago, and I was flabbergasted just because I didn't know. And especially with some of the issues that have come up recently, I feel like it's really important for the youth of today to be educated, because although we might not be as educated as anybody else in town, we are going to grow up here, and the issues, geopolitical, economic, they all apply to us, whether we want to hear about it or not. So I'm glad to be back, and I'm looking forward to this next year. Thank you.
You forgot something, the Powder Puff Bowl. The homecoming event, the girls playing from each class had a team, played football. The juniors won. Seniors were second, and the sophomore girls were third, and the freshman girls were last. It was a very fun event, and it was an absolutely beautiful night that they were out there playing football. Yes. Okay. Next one on the agenda will be Ms. Wackler.
Didn't I talk enough already? Thank you. I would like to thank Cadence for coming and talking to us all about the new options for us, possibility of the new possible market. I also want to remind everybody that tickets are on sale for the Soldotna Chamber Pie Auction, which will be October 21st this year. And this Saturday, there are the auditions for The Wizard of Oz put on by Triumphant Theater will be at So High. So it will be at So High. I know that's kind of a moot point for some people, but for parents looking at what school each place is going, where it's going to be held, having it in Soldotna is super important for those of us that work, that need to get kids back and forth. I really enjoy that it's at So High this year. The last event that my daughter was in was at KCHS. Makes my life a lot better that it's at So High, but we should all look forward to attending once that production is underway as well. So thank you.
Ms. Hutchings.
Well, I'd like to welcome Mr. Cassidy back. It was entertaining sitting next to him all last year, so I'm sure it will be entertaining again. I would like to thank for the presentation that we had this evening. It was great. I also am happy to hear that we're doing so well on sales tax. That's exciting for all of us. And for the field house to finally be coming to fruition is very, very encouraging, because we have been working on this forever. And the fact that the prices came in back where we thought they should be originally, I'm even more ecstatic about that. And I want to thank the chamber. They did a really great job this summer with Wednesday in the market. And they even managed to get the rain held off quite a few days, even though it was raining the rest of the day. When it came to music, they managed to have some fairly nice evenings. So on that note, I think I'm done.
Mr. Nelson.
A lot of good things happened tonight. I'm glad got the field house in. That's an excellent step in the right direction. Arts and Culture Master Plan. I think things like that we do as a city differentiate us from others, and being able to look at these things and have a good plan, and even to look at some of these things holistically. And that's why I did appreciate also the riverfront redevelopment discussion. My takeaway of that is there's really a lot that we need to very carefully think about, and I appreciated that discussion. And I'm a consultant, I can say this, not just saying what we want to hear, right? Actually having a realistic point of view for what some of these things might look like financially, staffing, that type of thing. And welcome back, Mr. Cassidy. Good to see you. That's everything I have.
Mr. Carey.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's been a good meeting. I like the work session we had before. On the field house, as always, I think we want to be, ask administration to be very cautious of change orders. Sometimes a low bid can end up being much higher when there are significant change orders along the way. Thank you.
Vice Mayor Parker.
Thank you, Mayor Whitney. As you expressed earlier, my condolences to my friend Representative Patola on the loss of her husband. Unfortunately, in Alaska, it's something that we've seen too many times, where our national officials lose either their lives or they lose a family member in an airplane accident. And I think in Alaska, we fly probably more than anybody in the United States. I was 4 days old when I took my first flight, and I'm fortunate that I've not been in a serious accident. So I am thinking of my friend Mary. Welcome back, Councilmember Cassidy. It's nice to see you. I have to tell a story though. Last week at Planning and Zoning, Noble showed up at the meeting because he thought that was the meeting where he was to be sworn in, but he sat through the meeting and he was able to listen to all the people who expressed their emptied their hearts out about the living conditions that they have at River Terrace and the conditions and the uncertainty that are affecting them. And what he heard is probably not something that many of the folks at his school, including some of the teachers and administrators, have heard. So thanks for sticking in there, Noble, and staying through the entire meeting.
Mr. Jolson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd also like to say, welcome back, Mr. Cassidy. It's always inspiring to see kids today trying to get involved in the local government process. It's very encouraging. So thank you for your effort in that. Additionally, I'd like to share with the council that I was able to attend a meeting today with city administration, the Chamber of Commerce board, and then some of the consultants from the First 40 consulting team that are working on our riverfront redevelopment plan to discuss incorporation of a visitor center, or basically how the Chamber of Commerce and their facility can possibly tie into this planning process. As you know, there's been a long established need in this community for a visitor center, just given the limitations, the current site they're on, the significant growth that the Chamber of Commerce has gone through in the last decade, and just the struggles that they have been incurring in their attempts to locate a site and figure out a path forward for a new facility. During their last strategic planning process as an organization, they set a goal to pursue the visitor center and incorporate it into the riverfront redevelopment planning process if at all possible, even at a high level. And some of the takeaways that we had from today's meeting were very encouraging. And it sounds like we'll likely be seeing some revision to the plan to incorporate an objective to have some kind of development towards an eventual visitor center in that district. And one of the recommendations that was discussed at length that we might be seeing come forward is modification of the marketplace facility to have some form of, permanent year-round chamber presence there, whether it's a full visitor center, offices, or whatnot. There's a lot of potential there, I think, to be a force multiplier in any kind of build out that we have to the marketplace. As you know, the Chamber of Commerce has been absolutely vital to the success of the Wednesday markets and the economic activity that has been generated from those. And I think that any ability that we have to assist that organization in finding a new home and expanding the capabilities of market building, if we end up going that route and developing one, I think we could see similar gains year round with general economic development in that area and that facility. So it's very exciting stuff. And I just wanted to let the council know where we're going with that.
Thank you. We'll move on to the next item on the agenda is executive session. We have no reason to have one this evening. The last item on the agenda is meeting and announcements. The September 21st, 2023 Airport Commission meeting has been canceled. And September 27th, 2023 is the City Council meeting at 6 p.m. Having nothing further on our agenda, we are adjourned.